My beloved brothers and sisters, one of the quiet mistakes many of us make in life is that we tell everyone about our problems before we turn to Allah. When something hurts us, when life becomes heavy, or when our hearts feel overwhelmed, the first reaction is often to explain everything to people, friends, relatives, even strangers. But the truth is, human beings cannot carry the weight of what only Allah can solve. Sometimes people misunderstand us, sometimes they judge us, and sometimes they simply cannot help. Yet Allah never misunderstands a single tear, a single worry, or a single whisper of the heart. This is why the believer learns a powerful habit. Before telling the world everything, first speak to the one who controls every outcome. Because when a servant turns sincerely to Allah, the door of relief begins to open in ways no human could ever arrange. It is part of human nature to want someone to listen when the heart feels heavy. When a person experiences difficulty, disappointment, or emotional pain, the first instinct is often to speak about it. People begin to share their worries with friends, family members, or even individuals who may not truly understand their situation. This reaction comes from the natural need for comfort and support. A person feels that by explaining their problem to others, the burden in their chest might become lighter. Many times this habit grows into something deeper. Instead of first turning to Allah, people begin to tell everyone around them about their struggles. Every difficulty becomes a story shared with multiple people. Every personal pain becomes a conversation repeated again and again. In some cases, this happens because a person hopes that someone will offer the perfect advice or solution. In other cases, it happens simply because speaking about the problem temporarily relieves the emotional pressure. But human beings are limited in what they can truly carry for someone else. A friend may listen with kindness, yet they may not fully understand the depth of what a person is feeling. Another person may respond with judgment rather than compassion. Some may offer advice that does not truly solve the issue. Others may unintentionally spread what was meant to be a private matter. These situations can sometimes make a person feel even more exposed and misunderstood than before. There is also another subtle effect that happens when we repeatedly tell people our problems. The heart slowly becomes more focused on the reactions of others than on the mercy of Allah. A person begins to search for comfort in human approval or sympathy, forgetting that the greatest source of relief comes from turning back to the Creator. The believer learns a different approach. Islam does not forbid seeking advice or speaking to trustworthy people when guidance is needed, but the first place the heart should turn is always Allah. Before sharing every detail with the world, the believer pauses and remembers that Allah already knows the situation completely. He knows the pain behind the words, the fears that are difficult to describe, and the hopes that remain hidden in the heart. When a person begins by speaking to Allah, something changes within them. The heart feels heard in a way that no human conversation can truly provide. A servant realizes that they are not alone in their struggle. Allah is aware of every moment, every tear, and every silent worry. This does not mean that people should never speak to others about their challenges. Advice and support can sometimes be beneficial, but the order matters. The believer understands that the first conversation should always be with Allah. When the heart begins there, everything else becomes clearer. Guidance becomes easier to recognize, patience becomes stronger, and the soul begins to find peace, knowing that the one who controls every outcome has already heard the concern. Human beings are naturally inclined to seek comfort from one another. When life becomes difficult, it feels easier to speak to someone who can listen, offer a few words, or simply sit beside us while we express what we are feeling. Support from others can sometimes bring temporary relief, and Islam does not forbid seeking advice from trustworthy people. But there is an important reality that every believer must understand. Human help has limits. No matter how caring a person may be, they cannot fully carry the burdens that exist within someone else's heart. A friend may listen for a while, but they may not truly understand the depth of the situation. Even those closest to us cannot always see the full picture of what we are experiencing. They only hear the parts that we are able to describe with words. There are also moments when people genuinely want to help but simply do not have the ability to change anything. Someone may offer sympathy, but sympathy does not remove the problem itself. Advice may be given with good intentions, yet the advice may not be the solution that is truly needed. Sometimes people may even misunderstand the situation completely. Instead of offering comfort, their words may unintentionally increase the pain. A person might expect understanding but receive criticism instead. In other cases, what was shared privately may be discussed with others, creating embarrassment or discomfort that was never intended. These situations remind us of a very important truth. Human beings are limited, their knowledge is limited, their patience is limited, and their ability to solve problems is limited. Even the most supportive person cannot control the outcome of events in our lives. When a believer understands this reality, they begin to see human help differently. They appreciate kindness and advice from others, but they do not depend on it completely. The heart learns not to place its full reliance on people, because people themselves are in need of help from Allah. Only Allah has complete knowledge of every detail in our lives. He knows the past, the present, and the future. He knows the struggles that we have not even spoken about. While people may hear only our words, Allah understands what lies within the heart itself. This is why the believer learns to turn to Allah before relying on anyone else. When a servant places their worries before Allah, they are speaking to the one who has the power to change every situation. No problem is too complicated for him, and no request is too small for his attention. When the heart understands the limits of human help, it begins to rely more deeply on Allah. People may come and go, advice may change, and situations may shift unexpectedly, but Allah remains constant. His knowledge never fails, His mercy never disappears, and His ability to bring relief is never limited. So while it is natural to seek support from others, the believer remembers that the ultimate source of help is always Allah. When a person places their trust in Him first, they discover a strength and peace that no human support alone could ever provide. There is a powerful shift that happens in the life of a believer when they learn to turn to Allah before turning to anyone else. Many people are used to sharing their worries with the world first. When something painful happens, the first reaction is to explain it to friends, relatives, or anyone who is willing to listen. But faith teaches a different habit, one that brings a deeper sense of peace. The believer learns that the first conversation about any difficulty should be with Allah. When a person turns to Allah first, they are placing their concern before the one who already understands it completely. Allah does not need an explanation to know what has happened. He knows the situation even before the person begins to speak about it. This awareness alone brings comfort to the heart, because it reminds the believer that they are not alone in their struggle. There is also a unique peace that comes from speaking to Allah in private. When a person raises their hands in dua, they are not worried about being judged, misunderstood, or criticized. Human conversations sometimes carry these fears, but a conversation with Allah is free from them. A servant can speak openly, honestly, and sincerely, knowing that every word is heard with mercy. Turning to Allah first also changes the way a person sees their problems. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by the situation, the believer remembers that the one they are asking for help controls every outcome. No problem is too complicated for Allah to resolve. What may seem impossible to people is always within the power of Allah. Another important benefit of turning to Allah first is that it strengthens the connection between the servant and their Creator. Every moment of dua becomes an act of worship. The believer begins to rely on Allah not only during times of difficulty but also during moments of ease. This habit builds a heart that trusts Allah deeply. The story of Prophet Yaqub, peace be upon him, is a beautiful reminder of this lesson. When he faced immense sadness and loss, he did not complain about his pain to the people around him. Instead, he turned directly to Allah and expressed his sorrow to the one who understood his heart completely. This shows that even the prophets recognize the power of speaking to Allah first. When a person makes this a habit, something remarkable begins to happen. The heart becomes calmer. Worries begin to feel lighter because they have been placed in the hands of the one who has the power to change every situation. Even if the problem remains for some time, the believer feels supported by their trust in Allah. This approach also protects the believer from unnecessary disappointment. People may sometimes fail to respond in the way we hope. They may misunderstand us or offer advice that does not truly help. But when the first reliance is placed on Allah, the heart remains steady regardless of how others respond. The believer realizes that turning to Allah first is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of deep faith. It shows that the heart recognizes where true power lies. Instead of searching endlessly for solutions among people, the believer begins with the one who controls every solution. When a servant builds this habit, their relationship with Allah becomes stronger with every difficulty they face. Each challenge becomes an opportunity to reconnect with their Creator, to make sincere dua, and to trust that Allah's wisdom will guide them through whatever lies ahead. There is a difference between seeking advice and constantly complaining about our problems to people. Seeking guidance from someone trustworthy can be beneficial, but repeatedly complaining about our struggles to everyone around us can slowly affect the heart in ways we may not realize. When a person makes this a habit, their focus begins to shift away from reliance on Allah and toward dependence on human reactions. Complaining frequently can cause the heart to remain stuck in negativity. Each time the same problem is repeated in conversation, the mind relives the pain again and again. Instead of moving toward patience and trust in Allah, the heart becomes more attached to the difficulty itself. The believer begins to feel trapped within their worries rather than guided through them. Another harm is that constant complaining may unintentionally weaken gratitude. When a person speaks only about what is going wrong in their life, they may begin to overlook the blessings that still exist around them. Even during difficult times, Allah continues to provide countless favors. But when the focus remains only on problems, these blessings become harder to recognize. There is also the possibility of misunderstanding. Not every person who listens to our struggles has the wisdom or sincerity to respond in a helpful way. Some people may judge the situation incorrectly, while others may offer advice that creates confusion rather than clarity. What began as an attempt to find comfort may instead leave the heart feeling more unsettled. Another subtle effect of complaining is that it may expose personal matters that should remain private. In moments of emotional pain, people sometimes reveal details about their lives that later become a source of regret. Islam encourages modesty and dignity in personal affairs, reminding believers that not every struggle needs to be shared publicly. Complaining too often can also affect relationships. When someone constantly speaks about their problems, those around them may begin to feel overwhelmed or unable to help. Even people who care deeply may struggle to know how to respond. Over time, conversations may begin to revolve only around difficulties instead of positive connection. More importantly, the habit of complaining can slowly distance the heart from the spiritual strength that comes from patience. Patience does not mean ignoring pain. It means carrying that pain with trust in Allah's wisdom. When a believer learns to express their struggles through dua rather than constant complaint, the heart begins to feel stronger and more balanced. Turning to Allah instead of complaining to people creates a different type of relief. When a servant speaks to Allah in private, there is no fear of judgment or misunderstanding. The believer can express their worries honestly, knowing that Allah understands every detail without explanation. The story of Prophet Yaqub, peace be upon him, provides a powerful example. When he experienced deep sorrow, he did not turn to people with endless complaints. Instead, he said that he was expressing his grief and sadness only to Allah. This teaches believers that the most powerful place to release pain is in conversation with the Creator. This approach does not mean isolating oneself from others or refusing helpful advice. Rather, it means protecting the heart from becoming dependent on human sympathy. The believer understands that people may support them, but ultimate relief comes from Allah alone. When a person replaces frequent complaints with sincere dua, the heart begins to feel lighter. Problems may still exist, but the perspective changes. The believer realizes that their situation is in the hands of the one who has complete knowledge and perfect wisdom. This habit strengthens patience, gratitude, and trust. Instead of repeating worries to the world, the believer turns inward and upward toward the one who never becomes tired of listening. By guarding the tongue from constant complaint and turning the heart toward Allah, a believer protects their inner peace. The difficulties of life remain, but they are carried with faith, dignity, and hope in Allah's mercy. One of the most beautiful aspects of the relationship between a servant and Allah is the ability to speak to Him privately. Private dua is a moment when a believer turns away from the noise of the world and speaks directly to the one who understands every feeling within the heart. There are no barriers, no appointments, and no conditions. A servant can call upon Allah at any time, knowing that He is always listening. When a person makes dua privately, it carries a special sincerity. There is no audience, no pressure, and no desire to impress anyone. The conversation is purely between the servant and their Creator. In that quiet moment, the heart becomes open and honest. A person can speak about their fears, their hopes, their mistakes and their struggles without holding anything back. Private dua also strengthens humility. When someone raises their hands in the quiet of the night or whispers a prayer during a moment of reflection, they are acknowledging that they need Allah's help. This humility brings a sense of peace to the heart because it reminds the believer that they are not expected to carry the weight of life alone. There is also great comfort in knowing that Allah understands what even words cannot express. Sometimes a person struggles to explain their feelings to others. Emotions may be complicated or difficult to describe, but Allah knows the state of the heart completely. Even a silent tear or a quiet sigh can become a form of dua when the heart turns sincerely toward Him. Private dua also protects a person's dignity. Instead of sharing every personal worry with the world, the believer learns to keep certain matters between themselves and Allah. This preserves privacy and prevents unnecessary exposure of personal struggles. At the same time, it allows the heart to release its burdens in a safe and sincere way. Another beauty of private dua is that it deepens the believer's connection with Allah. Each time a person turns to Him in quiet prayer, the relationship becomes stronger. The heart begins to rely on Allah more than on the reactions of people. Over time, this habit builds a deep sense of trust in Allah's wisdom. The example of the prophets reminds us of this powerful habit. When Prophet Zakaria, peace be upon him, called upon Allah for a child, he did so quietly and privately. His dua was sincere and humble, and Allah responded with a blessing that seemed impossible according to human expectations. This story teaches believers that sincere private dua carries immense power. Private moments of dua also allow a person to reflect deeply on their life. In those quiet conversations with Allah, a believer may ask for forgiveness for past mistakes, guidance for the future, and strength to face current challenges. These moments create clarity within the heart. Another benefit of private dua is that it removes the fear of judgment. People sometimes hesitate to share their struggles with others because they worry about being misunderstood. But when speaking to Allah, there is no such fear. The believer knows that Allah listens with mercy and compassion. The beauty of private dua is also found in its simplicity. It does not require special language or perfect words. A sincere heart is enough. A believer can speak in their own words, expressing whatever is within their heart, knowing that Allah values sincerity above all else. The habit of making private dua transforms the way a person faces difficulties. Instead of immediately turning to people, the believer first turns to Allah. This creates a sense of calm and confidence, knowing that the situation has been placed in the hands of the one who has complete control. Private dua also reminds believers that Allah is always near. Even in moments when a person feels alone, the door to Allah remains open. This awareness brings comfort and hope, especially during times of hardship. The more a believer practices private dua, the more they begin to experience its beauty. It becomes a moment of peace in the middle of life's challenges. It becomes a space where the heart can rest and reconnect with its Creator. A private dua is not only about asking for solutions, it is about building a relationship with Allah. It is about trusting that He hears every word and understands every feeling. When a servant learns to speak to Allah sincerely and privately, they discover a form of comfort that no human conversation can truly replace. There is a powerful change that takes place in a believer's life when Allah becomes their first support. Many people naturally turn to others when something goes wrong. They look for someone to listen to, someone to comfort them, or someone to solve the problem. While human support can sometimes be helpful, the believer learns that the strongest form of support comes from turning to Allah before anyone else. When Allah becomes the first place a person turns to, the heart begins to experience a deeper sense of stability. Human beings can sometimes offer encouragement, but they cannot control outcomes. Their help is limited by their knowledge and ability. Allah, however, has complete control over every situation. Nothing in the universe happens outside of His knowledge and wisdom. A believer who places Allah first understands that every difficulty has a purpose. Even when a problem feels overwhelming, the heart remembers that Allah is fully aware of what is happening. This awareness alone brings comfort because it removes the feeling of facing life alone. Another beautiful effect of relying on Allah first is that it protects the heart from disappointment. People may sometimes respond in ways we do not expect. They may misunderstand our situation or fail to provide the support we hoped for. When the heart depends entirely on people, these moments can feel painful. But when reliance is placed on Allah first, the believer remains calm even if people cannot help. Turning to Allah first also strengthens trust. When a person regularly makes dua, seeks guidance through prayer, and remembers Allah during difficulties, they begin to witness how situations gradually unfold in ways they never imagined. Problems that once seemed impossible slowly begin to ease. This does not mean that believers should completely avoid seeking advice from others. Islam encourages consultation with wise and trustworthy individuals. However, the difference lies in where the heart places its ultimate reliance. Advice may come from people, but the believer knows that the true solution comes only from Allah. The prophets themselves showed this powerful example. Whenever they faced great challenges, they first turned to Allah with sincerity and patience. Their strength came from their deep connection with their Creator. This reliance gave them the courage to continue even when circumstances seemed extremely difficult. When Allah becomes the first support in a person's life, fear begins to fade. The believer understands that whatever happens is within Allah's control. Even if the path ahead seems uncertain, there is peace in knowing that Allah's wisdom is always greater than our understanding. This reliance also brings emotional balance. Instead of constantly searching for approval or reassurance from people, the believer finds reassurance in their relationship with Allah. The heart becomes less dependent on human reactions and more connected to divine guidance. A person who turns to Allah first develops a strong inner calm. Life's challenges still appear, but they no longer create the same level of anxiety. The believer learns to say their dua, take the necessary steps, and trust that Allah will guide the outcome in the best possible way. Another beautiful aspect of this reliance is that it deepens gratitude. When a person recognizes that every blessing comes from Allah, they begin to appreciate even the smallest moments of ease. Gratitude grows naturally when the heart acknowledges the source of every favor. The believer also begins to see difficulties differently. Instead of viewing them as punishments, they begin to understand them as opportunities to strengthen faith and patience. Each challenge becomes a moment to reconnect with Allah and renew trust in His wisdom. When Allah becomes the first support, the believer experiences a sense of peace that cannot be created by worldly solutions alone. Even during hardship, the heart remains hopeful because it knows that Allah's mercy is always near. This habit transforms the way a person approaches life. Instead of running from one human solution to another, the believer begins with the one who holds every solution. By turning to Allah first, the heart finds strength, patience, and a quiet confidence that whatever lies ahead will unfold according to His perfect wisdom. There are moments in life when a person reaches a point where no human solution seems strong enough to fix the situation. Advice may have been given, conversations may have happened, and every effort may have been tried, yet the problem still remains. These moments teach a powerful lesson. There are things in life that people simply cannot solve. Human beings are limited in their knowledge, their power, and their ability to change what has already unfolded. This is where the believer learns a beautiful form of trust. Instead of exhausting the heart by seeking answers from everyone, the believer begins to place the matter in the hands of Allah. When a person says, sincerely, Allah knows my situation, it is not a statement of defeat, it is a statement of faith. People may listen for a while, but they cannot carry the full weight of someone else's worries. Even the most caring friend cannot fully understand every thought or emotion that exists within the heart. Sometimes people try to help but unintentionally say things that increase confusion rather than bring clarity. These experiences remind us that human help, while valuable at times, is never complete. Allah, on the other hand, knows every detail of every situation. He knows the events that led to the problem and the outcomes that will follow in the future. Nothing is hidden from His knowledge. When a believer turns to Allah and places their concern in His hands, they are speaking to the one who has the ability to change every circumstance. One of the most powerful aspects of faith is learning to let go of the need to control everything. Human beings often feel anxious because they want to solve every problem immediately. When the solution does not appear, frustration begins to grow. But when the heart learns to trust Allah, a different kind of peace begins to develop. Letting Allah handle what people cannot does not mean that a person stops trying. Islam encourages believers to take reasonable steps and seek solutions, but after those efforts are made, the heart must release its anxiety and trust that Allah will guide the outcome in the best possible way. There are countless moments in life where situations change in ways no one expected. Doors that seemed completely closed suddenly open. Problems that appeared permanent begin to fade. These moments remind believers that Allah's wisdom works beyond what human understanding can see. Another important benefit of relying on Allah is the calmness it brings to the heart. When a person constantly worries about problems that cannot be solved immediately, the mind becomes overwhelmed. But when those worries are placed in the hands of Allah, the burden becomes lighter. The prophets themselves showed this kind of trust during the most difficult moments of their lives. They faced challenges that seemed impossible, yet their hearts remained firm because they knew that Allah was fully aware of their situation. This example teaches believers that true strength comes from trusting Allah even when the path forward is unclear. Instead of allowing fear to dominate the mind, the believer remembers that Allah's plan is always greater than human planning. When a servant sincerely asks Allah for help, they are acknowledging that the final solution belongs to Him. This recognition is a form of worship because it shows humility and reliance on the Creator rather than on human ability alone. This habit transforms the way a person experiences life's challenges. Instead of feeling trapped by circumstances, the believer begins to see every difficulty as something that can be placed in Allah's care. The heart becomes calmer because it knows that nothing escapes Allah's knowledge and nothing happens outside of His wisdom. Even when answers take time, the believer continues to trust that Allah is guiding every step. Letting Allah handle what people cannot is not about giving up. It is about recognizing where true power lies. When a believer places their worries in Allah's hands, they discover a form of peace that human reassurance alone could never provide. Before sharing every worry with people, pause for a moment and remember who truly holds the solution to every problem. Human beings may listen for a moment, but Allah listens without limit. People may misunderstand your story, but Allah knows every detail of your heart. This is why the believer learns to turn to Allah first, speaking to Him with sincerity, humility, and trust. When you place your worries in His hands, the heart becomes lighter and hope begins to grow again. So the next time life feels heavy, raise your hands, whisper your concerns to Allah, and trust that the one who hears every silent prayer is fully capable of changing your situation in ways you never expected.